This video is about a southern yellow pine plantation species trial located in central Mississippi, south of Crystal Springs. And the study site is located where the lower Thin Louse meets the lower coastal plain, so it is influenced to some extent by the Mississippi River. And it's located on the MAFES Truck Crops Branch Experiment Station. And it's approximately 6 acres, split in two, approximately 3 acres, because of a power line that runs through the middle of it. The soil series is heavily Providence silt loam, which is typic Fagiolidolphs. And it's been pasture grass and cut for hay for at least 20 years. Many people may not realize that prior to the arrival of the Europeans, shortleaf pine had a much greater presence on the landscape in Mississippi, and that in much of southern Mississippi, longleaf pine was dominant. But much of their acreage has been lost and replanted to loblolly pine or slash pine because of their faster growth rates and generally better survival. And also because both shortleaf pine and particularly longleaf pine are both fire-dependent ecosystems, and with active fire suppression beginning around 100 or so years ago, the landscape is much different than it has been at times historically. So this study was established to compare longleaf pine, essentially at its northern limit historically, and shortleaf pine to loblolly pine. Because of better nursery practices, the planting of container stock, better site preparation, better knowledge of the proper planting depth, and because we know the importance of controlling competing vegetation early in the rotation of longleaf pine is a more dependable alternative than it has been in the past. And there are reforestation incentive programs available for longleaf pine to help restore its once more dominant ecosystem. And there has been efforts to restore the once more commonly present shortleaf pine ecosystem. And perhaps at some point in the future, there may be some financial incentive programs for shortleaf pine, similar to longleaf pine, to help restore its once more present ecosystems. This study is going to compare container longleaf and container shortleaf with bare root loblolly pine. And longleaf pine is going to be planted at the proper depth, and shortleaf and loblolly pine are going to be planted deep. And a high-quality loblolly pine seedling was selected, mass control pollinated. And hence, we can see if the container stock will help longleaf pine and shortleaf pine better compete with loblolly.
Next, we can talk about planting density, which is the number of seedlings planted per acre. And depending on the particular operation selected, it can impact site preparation and early vegetation control costs. It can be used to manipulate the time to crown closure, which often has an impact in terms of the timing of the first thinning. And crown closure is highly related to the amount of understory vegetation through time, which is important for things such as wildlife habitat or, say, grazing of domestic animals. And although greater densities may help with self-pruning and knots, hence wood quality, with the quality of seedlings that we're planting today, planting densities from 400 to 500 seedlings will result in a high quality stand at the time of thinnings or in final harvest. And even planting densities as low as 350 should result in high quality stands at the timing of thinnings and final harvest. But lower planting densities mean a shorter time to more valuable chip and saw, and particularly saw logs and plight logs. Plus, often more of the more valuable products at a particular age. And you can see, given current market conditions, this is Mississippi fourth quarter 2022 pine stumpage prices, that chip and saw is worth around 4 to 5 times more than pulpwood, and that saw timber is worth around 7 to 8 times more than pulpwood, and that saw timber is worth about twice as much as pine chip and saw. So the shorter the amount of time I can get to chip and saw timber, and if I can produce more chip and saw timber in a shorter amount of time, that is going to be beneficial financially. Beyond any potential site preparation or herbaceous weed control financial benefits from planting fewer seedlings per acre and any reductions in the amount of chemical on your property. Obviously, if you plant fewer seedlings per acre, you're going to reduce the amount of cost, the amount of direct cost associated with purchasing the seedlings and of planting the seedlings themselves. And here you can see the layout of the study. And this is the between row spacing, which is 16 feet in this case. And then we have the within row spacing, which is 6 feet, or the distance between the planted seedlings within a row. And this is actually a cutover site. It's not a hay field or pasture land or old field, but nonetheless, you can see the between row spacing and then the within row spacing, or the distance between the white flags and the blue flags. And so we can manipulate the between row spacing or width or length and the within row spacing, and we can alter the amount of reforestation costs associated with the purchasing of the number of seedlings and the actual planting cost of the seedlings. And so here in the table you can see the between row spacing and the within row spacing, and that different values will result in different number of seedlings per acre. We often buy seedlings by the thousands, and currently probably cost per thousands of seedlings ranges from around 60, probably 80, up to around 250, and maybe up to $300 per thousand seedlings, depending on the species, whether container or bare root stock, the generations, is it first gen, third gen, etc. And so you can see that by reducing the planting density, we can greatly reduce the cost of purchasing the seedlings directly, but also the cost incurred in planting, the actual manual labor of putting the seedling into the ground. And there are some cost differences between hand planting versus machine planting, but you can see that by planting a lower density, I'm going to reduce the amount of cost associated with my seedlings, both in terms of purchasing them as well as planting them. Planting 454 seedlings is also important for two other reasons. One, in order to take advantage of the Mississippi Reforestation Tax Credit, you must plant at least 450 seedlings per acre. And to me, planting around 400 to 500 seedlings per acre, 450 seedlings per acre, provides you a little more flexibility in terms of the number of thinnings and future market conditions. To me, when you plant 600 or more seedlings per acre, you're almost forced into a two-thinning regime. And I'm sure, as many of you can attest to, landowners are having difficulty conducting thinnings. Or if they are even able to conduct a thinning, they're basically having to give their pulpwood timber away. And when you plant 300 or 350 seedlings per acre, you kind of limit yourself to the fact that you can only have one thinning. And thus, if the pulpwood market surprisingly improves over the next 20 years, you may not be able to fully utilize that market. And that's kind of why I like the planting density of 454 seedlings. In my opinion, it gives me a little bit of flexibility to play the future pulpwood and chip and saw markets and ultimately the saw timber markets.
And we are going to plant the seedlings in a rectangular fashion rather than square. And we are going to use 16 feet between rows and plant seedlings 6 feet away from one another within a row. And there are several advantages to rectangular planting. And here you can see the layout of the rows for the area on the right side of the power line. One species will be planted here, a second species here, and a third species here, with buffer rows in between the species. And in order to get the proper spacing between rows, when ripping or subsoiling, a 16-foot PVC pipe was used. As a broadcast chemical site preparation, 4 quarts per acre of accord along with an MSO surfactant were applied to the field on October 21st to reduce and control the existing vegetation. And this was done to give the seedlings a competitive advantage near the time of planting. And you can see on December 13th that we had good control of the vegetation. However, there was a period where the temperatures became warmer and we likely had some regrowth. As a mechanical site preparation, preparation method, subsoiling or ripping was conducted on December 13th to break up the ground before planting. And this, in a sense, shatters any compaction pan associated with the past pasture practices and hay collection. And subsoiling breaks up the soil and minimizes soil compaction issues, hopefully allowing the new seedlings to grow to greater depths and helping to ensure that the seedlings will attain their adequate root growth potential. Subsoiling also prevents surface water runoff. Since we intend to hand plant, the subsoiling ripping operation is essential. Plus, the hand planting crew can easily follow the ripped lines. And it's recommended to conduct this practice at least 60 days and, if possible, 90 days prior to planting to allow the soil, particularly through rain events, to settle back into the rip. And we intend to plant seedlings sometime in February. And we've already had 2 significant rain events, so we're hoping that the soil will settle back into the rip prior to planting. As with any venture, there's always going to be issues. And planning is going to help reduce those issues, but nonetheless, they will always arise. And one issue that I've already alluded to was weather. Rain events cause us to delay the timing of the chemical site preparation. Warmer weather following the chemical site preparation may have led to some regrowth. And another issue is that we also wanted to include Chopper Gen 2 into the herbicide tank mix, but we had some issues getting that chemical, and thus we just decided to apply the Accord. Another issue was the power line and making sure that we were able to conduct the ripping subsoiling operation. And you may want to call 811 prior to doing any operation. Another issue was at one time there was a house located in part of this field, and so there was issues with cement, among other objects, that created some issues with the shank. And this is just an example of issues that may come up when conducting a reforestation. And then also there was a propane tank, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't hit that in case it was full. We were pretty sure it was empty, but you never know. And yet this is another example of making sure you're aware of what is in the field.
And a big issue is that I learned in early January that the freeze that was in Mississippi and much of the southeastern U.S. during the 3rd week of December up until Christmas and beyond resulted in the loss of the source of the shortleaf pine seedlings, and that other nurseries also lost their container shortleaf pine seedlings. Therefore, a decision must be made. There are available bare root seedlings from the Georgia Forestry Commission, which are 2nd generation, and hence, in some ways, it may be better to plant the 2nd generation bare root seedlings. For the most part, genetics are genetics. If we can get the bare root seedlings to survive, as well as the container seedlings, the genetics probably are going to be a benefit from the 2nd gen. And one could also wait until next year to plant the shortleaf. One problem with that is, right, they're 1 year behind the loblolly and longleaf, which is not a major issue. But operationally in the real world, right, that landowner would basically probably have to redo the site preparation, particularly the chemical site preparation. So there are decisions to be made.
Make sure to take advantage of federal and state reforestation tax provisions, and this is the federal deduction and amortization provisions and the Mississippi Reforestation Tax Credit. There are certain tax advantages to conducting reforestation activities over 2 tax years, where tax years the beginning of January to the end of December. So if we conduct the mechanical and chemical site preparation in tax year 0, we could say October, December, and then we plant the seedlings and purchase the seedlings in tax year 1, say in January, February, or March, and then we conduct a first year herbaceous weed control in April or May, you can see that we've spread those operations out over 2 tax years. And the Mississippi Reforestation Tax Credit is very advantageous. A deduction and amortization both reduce the amount of income that you owe tax on, but an amortization is a deduction spread over several years, and therefore a deduction is advantageous to an amortization. But a tax credit, such as with the Mississippi Reforestation Tax Credit, actually reduces the amount of tax that you owe. It reduces your tax liability. So a credit is advantageous to a deduction and an amortization.